Billionaire sees a woman collapse in his mansion, then realizes she's his sister he never knew. Edward Klein, 72, surveyed the scene before him with a detached air, a faint sense of weariness settling over him despite the festive atmosphere. His mansion, a sprawling Victorian perched high on a hill in San Francisco's Pacific Heights neighborhood, was filled with guests, ostensibly celebrating his birthday. Crystal chandeliers glittered, champagne flowed, and a jazz quartet played softly in the background. But all felt hollow. Edward was a billionaire, the founder of Klein Communications, a telecommunications giant that had made him one of the wealthiest men in California. He had amassed a fortune, built an empire, and achieved a level of success that most people only dreamed of. Yet, he was profoundly alone. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 10 years earlier after a long battle with illness. They had had a good marriage, a comfortable companionship, but it had lacked a certain spark, a passionate connection that he had secretly longed for. They had no children, a mutual decision made early in their marriage, a decision he now sometimes regretted. He had few close friends, his social circle consisting primarily of business associates and acquaintances, people who were drawn to his wealth and power, but who knew little about the man beneath the surface. He was a man of routine, of order, of carefully controlled emotions. He woke up early, exercised rigorously, ate a healthy breakfast, and spent his days immersed in the world of business, even though he had officially retired from the day-to-day operations of his company. He found solace in work, in the familiar rhythm of deals and negotiations, in the illusion of control it provided. The birthday party was a charade, a social obligation orchestrated by his assistant, a well-meaning attempt to lift his spirits, to pull him out of his self-imposed isolation. But he felt like an observer, a spectator in his own life, watching the festivities unfold with a sense of detachment, a feeling that he was somehow separate from the laughter, the conversations, the celebrations. He sipped his sparkling water, his gaze drifting across the room, taking in the expensively dressed guests, their carefully crafted smiles, their superficial conversations. He felt a pang of loneliness, a yearning for genuine connection, a longing for something more than this gilded cage he had built around himself. He was a man surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. His wealth had provided him with every material comfort, but it had also isolated him, creating a barrier between him and the rest of the world. He was a king in his castle, but a prisoner of his own success, his heart heavy with a quiet despair that no amount of money could erase. The solitary celebration was a stark reminder of the emptiness of his life, a life filled with achievements but devoid of genuine connection, a life that was about to be irrevocably changed by the unexpected collapse of a young woman he had never met. Ana Ramirez, 28, moved through the crowded ballroom with practiced efficiency, her tray laden with champagne flutes, her smile fixed and polite. She was working as a temporary maid for a catering company, one of several jobs she juggled to make ends meet. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and it allowed her to pursue her real passion, writing. Anna had grown up in a series of foster homes and orphanages, never knowing her parents, her past shrouded in mystery. She had learned to be resilient, to be self-reliant, to navigate the world with a mixture of caution and optimism. She had a quiet strength, a determination to make a better life for herself, to overcome the challenges of her upbringing. She had always dreamed of becoming a writer, of telling stories, of creating worlds with words. She spent her free time scribbling in notebooks, crafting poems and short stories, pouring her heart and soul into her writing. She had a natural talent, a gift for language, a way of capturing the human experience with empathy and insight. But dreams were a luxury she could rarely afford. She had to work to survive, to pay the rent on her tiny studio apartment in the Mission District, a far cry from the opulent mansion where she was currently serving hors d'oeuvres to San Francisco's elite. She had been hired for this particular event through a temp agency, a last-minute replacement for another worker who had called in sick. She was grateful for the opportunity for the extra income, but she also felt a sense of alienation, a stark awareness of the vast gulf that separated her world from the world of the wealthy guests she was serving. She moved through the crowd, her eyes downcast, her movements unobtrusive, trying to blend into the background to avoid attracting attention. She was used to being invisible, to being overlooked, to being treated as if she were less than simply because of her job, her circumstances, her lack of social standing. She carried with her always a small silver bracelet. It was her only tangible connection to her past, her only memento of her mother, a woman she had never known. The bracelet was an antique, a delicate chain with small, intricately carved charms, each representing a different symbol: a heart, a star, a flower, a bird. She had been found wearing the bracelet as a baby, abandoned in a church, wrapped in a blanket, with no identification, no note, no clue to her origins. The bracelet had become her talisman, her lucky charm, her connection to a past she could only imagine. She often touched the bracelet, her fingers tracing the outline of the charms, wondering about the woman who had given it to her, wondering about her family, her history, her identity. She had tried to find information about her past, but the records were sealed, the trail had gone cold, and she had eventually resigned herself to the mystery, to the unknown origins of her life. The hired help, the temporary worker, the invisible presence in the background, was about to become the central figure in a drama that would shatter the carefully constructed world of the billionaire host, a drama that would connect her to a past she had never known, a family she had never imagined, a future she had never dared to dream of. The heirloom, the silver bracelet, was the key, the clue, the tangible link that would unravel the mystery and change both of their lives forever. The party was in full swing, the music, the laughter, the conversations blending into a cacophony of sound. Anna, her tray now empty, was making her way back to the kitchen to refill it when she felt a sudden wave of dizziness. She had been feeling unwell all day, a lingering fatigue that she had attributed to lack of sleep and the stress of her multiple jobs. She had pushed herself to work, knowing that she couldn't afford to take a day off, knowing that she needed the money to pay her rent, to buy groceries, to survive. But now, the dizziness intensified, her vision blurred, and her legs felt weak. She tried to steady herself, to grab onto a nearby table, but it was too late. She collapsed, her body hitting the polished floor with a sickening thud, the sound echoing through the room, silencing the music, the laughter, the conversations. The guests gasped, their eyes turning towards the scene of the commotion. Some rushed forward to help. Others recoiled in disgust, their expressions a mixture of concern and disdain. Edward Klein, who had been standing near the fireplace, engaged in a conversation with a group of business associates, saw the young woman fall. He felt a jolt of something concern, perhaps, or a flicker of human empathy that he had long suppressed. He pushed his way through the crowd, reaching the fallen woman's side before anyone else. He knelt down beside her, his eyes scanning her face, her pale skin, her closed eyes. "She's fainted," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Someone call an ambulance." He gently checked her pulse, her breathing. She was alive but unconscious. He loosened her collar, trying to make her more comfortable, his hands moving with a surprising tenderness. As he did so, his gaze fell upon her wrist. He saw the silver bracelet, the delicate chain, the small, intricately carved charms. He froze, his heart skipping a beat, his mind racing. It was the bracelet, the one his mother had worn every day for as long as he could remember. The one she had told him was a family heirloom, a precious object passed down through generations. The one that had disappeared, along with his sister, so many years ago. He stared at the bracelet, his eyes wide with disbelief, his body trembling with a mixture of shock, recognition, and a flicker of hope that he had thought long extinguished. He gently touched the bracelet, his fingers tracing the outline of the charms, each one a familiar symbol, a memory from his childhood. He remembered his mother telling him stories about the bracelet, about its history, about its significance. He looked at the young woman's face, at her closed eyes, at her pale skin. He saw a resemblance, a faint echo of his mother's features, a subtle similarity that he had never noticed before. The connection, the impossible, improbable connection, was forming in his mind, a spark of recognition, a flicker of hope, a possibility that seemed too incredible to be true. The collapse, the sudden fall, the dramatic scene in the midst of his lavish party had become a turning point, a moment of revelation, a catalyst for a chain of events that would unravel the secrets of his past and change his life forever. The hired help, the invisible presence in the background, had become the center of his attention, the key to unlocking a mystery he had never dared to hope could be solved. Edward's childhood had been privileged, but emotionally sterile. He had grown up in a large, imposing house in an affluent suburb of Boston, surrounded by material comforts, but lacking in genuine warmth and affection. His father, a successful lawyer, had been a distant, authoritarian figure, a man who valued discipline, achievement, and social standing above all else. He had been emotionally unavailable, preoccupied with his work, his career, and his social obligations. His mother, Eleanor, had been a complex and enigmatic woman. She had been beautiful, elegant, and socially prominent, but she had also been deeply unhappy. She had a strained relationship with her husband, a marriage that was more a business partnership than a loving union. Edward had been a quiet, introverted child, often overlooked by his busy parents. He had found solace in books, in learning, in the world of his imagination. He had excelled in school, driven by a desire to please his father, to earn his approval, to somehow fill the void of emotional connection. He had never known about his sister. His parents had never spoken of her, had never mentioned her existence. He had grown up believing he was an only child, unaware of the family secret that had been carefully concealed, buried beneath layers of guilt, shame, and social pressure. The whispers of the past, the fragments of memory that had surfaced after seeing the bracelet, were vague and fragmented. He remembered overhearing snippets of conversations, hushed arguments between his parents, a sense of tension and unease that he couldn't understand. He remembered one particular incident, a vivid memory that had stayed with him over the years. He had been about 8 years old, and he had walked into his parents' bedroom unexpectedly. He had seen his mother sitting on the bed, crying, clutching a small, silver bracelet in her hand. His father had been standing by the window, his back to her, his body rigid with anger. He had heard his father say, "It's for the best, Eleanor. It's the only way. We have to think of our reputation, our future." His mother had replied, her voice choked with sobs, "But she's my baby, my own flesh and blood. How can I just—" The conversation had ended abruptly when his father had noticed him standing in the doorway. He had been ushered out of the room, told to go play, to forget what he had seen and heard. He had never forgotten. The image of his mother crying, clutching the bracelet, had remained etched in his memory, a haunting reminder of a hidden sorrow, a family secret that he had never been able to unravel. Now, seeing the same bracelet on the wrist of the young woman who had collapsed at his party, the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. The whispers of the past were becoming clearer, louder, more insistent. The truth, long buried and concealed, was about to be revealed, forcing Edward to confront the reality of his family's history, the choices his parents had made, and the consequences of those choices on his own life and the life of the sister he had never known. The carefully constructed facade of his childhood, the illusion of a perfect family, was crumbling, revealing the darkness, the secrets, and the unspoken pain that had always lurked beneath the surface. After Anna regained consciousness, she was taken to the hospital for observation. Edward, overriding her protests, insisted on paying for her medical expenses and ensuring she received the best possible care. He also, discreetly, arranged for a DNA sample to be taken from both Anna and himself, a necessary step to confirm his growing suspicion. He spent the next few days in a state of heightened anxiety, his mind racing with questions, with doubts, with a flicker of hope that he was almost afraid to acknowledge. He needed to know the truth, to understand the circumstances of his sister's disappearance, to unravel the mystery that had haunted him for so long. He decided to delve into his family history, to search for any clues, any hints, any forgotten details that might shed light on the situation. He started with his mother's will, a document he had never fully examined, a document that he had always assumed was a straightforward distribution of assets. He contacted his family lawyer, Mr. Thompson, an elderly gentleman who had known the Kleins for decades and had handled their legal affairs with discretion and efficiency. He asked Mr. Thompson to retrieve the will from the archives and to meet with him as soon as possible. The meeting took place in Edward's study, a large, imposing room filled with books, antique furniture, and the ever-present ticking of clocks. Mr. Thompson, his face etched with concern, handed Edward a thick, sealed envelope. "I must warn you, Edward," he said, his voice grave. "This will contain certain provisions that may be unsettling." Edward nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He took the envelope, his hands trembling slightly, and broke the seal. He began to read, his eyes scanning the legal jargon, his mind struggling to make sense of the words. As he read, the truth began to emerge, a shocking revelation that shattered his carefully constructed world, a truth that had been hidden for decades, a secret that had been buried beneath layers of guilt and shame. The will contained a codicil, a separate section added shortly before Eleanor's death. In this codicil, Eleanor confessed to having given birth to a daughter out of wedlock before she had met and married Edward's father. The child, a girl named Anna, had been deemed illegitimate by society's standards, a source of potential scandal for the prominent Klein family. Eleanor's parents, staunchly conservative and deeply concerned about their social standing, had pressured her to give up the child. They had arranged for Anna to be sent away, to be raised in secrecy, to be erased from the family history. Eleanor had reluctantly agreed, believing that it was the only way to protect her reputation, to secure her future, to avoid the shame and ostracism that would have followed such a revelation. But she had never forgotten her daughter. She had secretly kept track of Anna, using a private investigator to monitor her progress, to ensure her well-being. She had also set aside a trust fund for Anna, a small sum of money that would be released to her upon her 25th birthday. The bracelet, the silver bracelet with the intricate charms, had been Eleanor's only tangible connection to her daughter. She had given it to Anna as a baby, a keepsake, a symbol of her love, a silent promise that she would never truly be forgotten. The will stipulated that Edward, upon learning the truth, should make every effort to find Anna, to welcome her into the family, to share his inheritance with her, to make amends for the years of separation and the injustice she had suffered. Edward finished reading, his hands shaking, his eyes filled with tears. He felt a wave of emotions wash over him: shock, disbelief, anger, grief, and a profound sense of guilt. He had lived his entire life unaware of his sister's existence, unaware of the secret that had shaped his family's history, unaware of the pain and suffering his mother had endured. He looked at Mr. Thompson, his face etched with anguish. Why didn't anyone tell me?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Mr. Thompson sighed, his expression filled with a mixture of sadness and regret. "Your mother made me promise," he said. "She wanted to protect you, to shield you from the truth. She believed it was for the best. She was a product of her time, Edward. Social conventions were different then. The stigma of an illegitimate child, it was a heavy burden to bear." Edward closed his eyes, his mind reeling. He felt a deep sense of betrayal, a profound sense of loss, a crushing weight of responsibility. He had a sister he had never known, a sister who had grown up without a family, without the love and support she deserved. He had to find her. He had to make things right. He had to fulfill his mother's dying wish. He had to rebuild the family that had been shattered by secrets and lies. Unveiling the will had been the key, the catalyst, the moment of truth that had set in motion a chain of events that would lead him to Anna, to his sister, to a new chapter in his life, a chapter filled with both challenges and the promise of healing, forgiveness, and a long overdue family reunion. Anna's life had been a stark contrast to the privileged existence of her unknown brother. After being abandoned in the church, she had been taken to St. Joseph's orphanage, a large, impersonal institution on the outskirts of San Francisco. St. Joseph's was a place of strict rules, rigid routines, and a constant undercurrent of loneliness. The children were cared for, but they were not loved. They were fed, clothed, and educated, but they lacked the warmth, the affection, the individual attention that every child craves. Anna was a quiet, introspective child, often overlooked by the staff and the other children. She found solace in books, in drawing, and in the small, silver bracelet that was her only possession, her only link to a past she could not remember. She would often touch the bracelet, her fingers tracing the outline of the charms, imagining the woman who had given it to her, wondering about her mother, her family, her identity. She would create stories in her mind, fantastical tales of a loving mother, a happy home, a life filled with joy and laughter. She excelled in school, her intelligence and her natural curiosity setting her apart from the other children. She devoured books, soaking up knowledge, finding refuge in the worlds created by authors, escaping the harsh realities of her own existence. But she also struggled with feelings of abandonment, of rejection, of not belonging. She often felt like an outsider, a misfit, a child without a history, without a future. She longed for a family, for a connection, for a sense of belonging that seemed forever out of reach. She had few friends, her quiet nature and her different background making it difficult for her to connect with the other children. She was often teased, bullied, and excluded, a target for the cruelty and indifference that sometimes festered in the overcrowded and under-resourced orphanage. She learned to be resilient, to be self-reliant, to protect herself from the pain and disappointment of her life. She built a wall around her heart, a defense mechanism against the harsh realities of her world. She left the orphanage at the age of 18, armed with a high school diploma, a few meager possessions, and a fierce determination to make a life for herself. She found a series of low-wage jobs, working as a waitress, a cashier, a cleaning lady. She struggled to make ends meet, to pay the rent on her tiny apartment, to afford the basic necessities of life. But she never gave up on her dreams. She continued to write, to draw, to nurture her creative spirit. She enrolled in night classes, taking courses in literature and art, seeking to expand her knowledge and hone her skills. She had also, over the years, made several attempts to find information about her origins, to trace her family history, to discover the identity of her mother. She had visited the church where she had been found. She had contacted social services. She had searched online databases, but all her efforts had been in vain. The records were sealed, the trail was cold, and she had eventually resigned herself to the mystery, to the unknown origins of her life. Anna's orphanage years were a testament to her strength, her resilience, and her unwavering spirit. She had faced adversity with courage, determination, and a quiet dignity that belied her difficult circumstances. She had built a life for herself, a life that was far from perfect, but filled with a quiet hope, a persistent yearning for connection, and a fierce determination to overcome the obstacles that had been placed in her path. The silver bracelet, her only link to her unknown past, had become a symbol of that hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of light, of discovery, of a future that might be different, brighter, more fulfilling. The meeting between Edward and Anna, after the revelation of their sibling relationship, was charged with a complex mix of emotions: disbelief, joy, anger, resentment, and a tentative, fragile hope. They met at Edward's mansion, a setting that was both overwhelming and symbolic. Anna, dressed in her simple clothes, felt out of place amidst the opulence, the grandeur, the sheer scale of the house. It was a world away from her small apartment, from the orphanage, from the life she had always known. Edward, in turn, felt a surge of guilt and shame as he watched Anna navigate the unfamiliar surroundings, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. He saw the stark contrast between their lives, the privilege he had taken for granted, the hardships she had endured. They sat in Edward's study, the same room where he had read his mother's will, the same room where the ticking clocks seemed to amplify the silence, the tension, the weight of their shared history. "I don't know what to say," Edward began, his voice hesitant, his eyes searching Anna's face. I'm still trying to process it all." Anna nodded, her expression guarded, her arms crossed defensively. "Me too," she said, her voice quiet but firm. It's a lot to take in." They talked for hours, sharing their stories, their memories, their experiences. Edward told her about his childhood, his parents, his mother's secret, his grief over her death, and his sister's disappearance. He expressed his remorse, his regret, his overwhelming desire to make amends for the past. Anna, in turn, told him about her life at the orphanage, her struggles, her dreams, her unwavering belief in the power of hope. She spoke of the silver bracelet, her only connection to her unknown mother, her only tangible link to her past. She also expressed her anger, her resentment, her feelings of abandonment and betrayal. She challenged Edward, questioned his motives, and demanded to know why her mother had given her away, why she had kept her existence a secret. Edward listened patiently, absorbing her anger, acknowledging her pain, accepting her right to question him, to challenge him, to demand answers. He didn't try to defend his mother's actions. He didn't try to minimize Anna's suffering. He simply offered his honest and heartfelt apology. "I can't imagine what you've been through," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I can't change the past, but I can try to make the future better. I want to be your brother, Anna. I want to be a part of your life. I want to give you the family you never had." Anna, her eyes filled with tears, looked at Edward, her expression softening slightly. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the pain, the regret, the genuine desire for connection. She saw the man beneath the wealth, the brother beneath the billionaire, the human being who was reaching out to her, offering her a chance to heal, to forgive, to build a new future. But she was also cautious, wary, protective of her heart. She had been hurt too many times, had learned to rely on her own strength, her own resilience. She wasn't ready to fully trust him, to fully embrace him as her brother. Not yet. "I need time," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to process this, to think about it. It's a lot to deal with." Edward nodded, understanding her hesitation, respecting her need for space. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, whenever you're ready." They agreed to have a DNA test, a formality, a way to confirm the truth they've both already sensed, a way to put to rest any lingering doubts. The results, a few days later, were conclusive. They were siblings sharing the same mother, their lives separated by a cruel twist of fate, their futures now intertwined by a shared past and a tentative hope for a new beginning. The confrontation had been emotionally draining, but it had also been cathartic. It had cleared the air, opened the lines of communication, and laid the foundation for a new relationship. A relationship built on honesty, on understanding, and on a shared commitment to healing the wounds of the past. The confirmation of their sibling relationship was just the beginning, the first step on a long and complex journey towards building a family, towards finding forgiveness, towards creating a future where love and connection could finally triumph over loss and separation. The months that followed were a period of adjustment, of learning, of slow, steady progress towards building a genuine sibling relationship. Edward and Anna spent time together regularly, getting to know each other, sharing stories, and gradually bridging the gap of years and experience that separated them. They explored San Francisco together, visiting museums, art galleries, and historical landmarks. Edward introduced Anna to his world, the world of wealth and privilege, but he also made an effort to understand her world, the world of working-class struggles and artistic aspirations. Anna, in turn, shared her passion for writing with Edward, showing him her poems, her short stories, her dreams of becoming a published author. Edward, impressed by her talent and her dedication, encouraged her to pursue her writing, offering his support and his connections to help her achieve her goals. They also delved deeper into their family history, researching their mother's past, trying to understand the circumstances that had led to Anna's abandonment. They discovered that Eleanor had been a complex and conflicted woman, trapped by social conventions, pressured by her family, and ultimately driven by a desperate desire to protect both of her children. They visited Eleanor's grave together, a silent moment of shared grief and a tentative step towards forgiveness. They also connected with distant relatives, cousins, and aunts they had never known, expanding their family circle and piecing together the fragments of their shared heritage. Edward used his wealth and influence to help Anna achieve her dreams. He provided her with financial security, allowing her to quit her multiple jobs and focus on her writing. He also helped her find a literary agent, a mentor who could guide her career and help her navigate the publishing world. Anna used her writing to help people. Anna, while grateful for Edward's support, remained fiercely independent. She was determined to succeed on her own merit, to prove to herself and to the world that she was more than just a billionaire's long-lost sister. She worked hard, honing her craft, submitting her work to literary magazines, and attending writing workshops. Their relationship was not without its challenges. There were moments of awkwardness, of misunderstanding, of lingering resentment. Anna struggled to reconcile the image of her wealthy, powerful brother with the reality of her own difficult upbringing. Edward struggled to understand Anna's perspective, her experiences, her deep-seated insecurities. But they persevered, driven by a shared desire to build a genuine connection, to create a family bond that had been denied to them for so long. They learned to communicate openly, to listen to each other, to respect each other's differences, and to forgive each other's imperfections. The ending, as with all real-life stories, was not a perfect, neatly tied-up resolution. It was a process, a journey, a continuing evolution of a relationship that was still finding its footing. Edward and Anna did not become instant best friends, but they became family. They celebrated holidays together, shared meals, and supported each other through life's ups and downs. They learned to lean on each other, to trust each other, to love each other, not in the idealized way of storybooks, but in the messy, complicated, and ultimately deeply rewarding way of real life. The silver bracelet, once a symbol of loss and abandonment, became a symbol of reunion, of connection, of a family rediscovered. It was a reminder of the past, but it was also a promise of the future, a future where brother and sister, reunited after decades of separation, could finally walk together, hand in hand, toward a new horizon of hope, healing, and a love that had endured the test of time. The billionaire had found his sister, and the maid had found her brother, and together, they had found something far more valuable than wealth or status. They had found family.